Welcome to the latest edition of Religion Sucks, and this one requires no notes either, because it should be pretty easy to go through. I mean, it's yet an obligatory topic that's come up a lot, which is the question, does religious indoctrination indeed count as child abuse? And I would say yes. All religious indoctrination is at least somewhat abusive. I mean, it runs the gamut. It runs on the scale. I mean, it's not the same kind of abuse as, you know, people beating people or raping them, or, you know, like the Catholic priests were doing to children, you know. But it's somewhere between just regular verbal abuse, yelling at someone, calling them an idiot, saying you're worthless, and these type of things to get someone's self-esteem, and the other horrible things. It's somewhere maybe in the middle, or slightly left of the middle of the spectrum. But since it's so widespread, and how many people have various sects of Christianity they're raised with, brought into, or Islam, or Judaism, Orthodox Judaism is probably really bad too, because it gets people to just, you know, not marry outside of their own, you know, religious circle or community. It's pretty bad. That's not any better than xenophobia or racism. I mean, the 21st century, the goal should be to get beyond all that. I don't know how someone couldn't think it was at least somewhat harmful and somewhat inappropriate to take a child who is in an age of mental plasticity, where it's like a sponge, and, you know, they're just learning about the world. They don't have all the mental tools and critical thinking faculties and you know, and anything about the scientific method or anything at that age, and they believe everything parents are telling them, and they still believe in, you know, the boogeyman, or they're afraid of the dark, and they believe in the tooth fairy, Santa Claus, all these other things. And parents, you know, and the things that parents are telling them that are innocuous and not bad. I mean, they don't have a way to distinguish that. They don't have the mental tools yet. So, in theory, you could just mold the child to believe any crazy idea you would want them to believe in that. And if you just do something which is totally inappropriate with that, which is to get people to believe something just for the sake of believing it, even there's no evidence for it. Or let's say you did it with a political ideology or some kind of crazy other thing. I fail to see how someone thinks that's a positive thing. I mean, just because someone likes their religious values and they want to instill them on their children, they believe it themselves personally, that doesn't excuse for how they go about doing it. That doesn't excuse indoctrination. You know, it's not an automatic, oh, I'm a parent and I believe this and I'm a Christian or whatever, or a Muslim. Oh, therefore my kids have to have this and have to have it constantly reinforced and imposed upon them, as if they're just playthings, or as if they're just your toys or something. You know, parents don't own their children. That's the thing you forget. They're not just little versions of you, which you can just want them to have whatever political views that you happen to have, you know, or like the same music as you, or the same religion, or hold the same philosophy in life. I mean, they're entitled to have totally different values than you. I mean, that's well within their scope. I mean, so to a certain extent, even as a child, you would have to respect that in them, even though more so as they got older and reached adolescence and adulthood. But a good movie to reference, if you really don't think this is the case, just watch a movie called Dogtooth. I'm not going to spoil it, but basically it's the idea where two parents they didn't want any bad, quote unquote, bad outside influences affecting their children. So they have, like, you know, adult, I don't know how old they're, it doesn't say in the film, they're probably like 20 something, or at least like past 19. There's like three other, I think it's two sisters and the brother. And all their life, they've just been, like, you know, misinformed about the outside world, and all these things just designed to keep them in this, you know, false paradise of security and safety, where they don't want to get out and really be, quote unquote, or the parents don't want them to get corrupted by it. And but it's really fucked up, the lengths that the things the parents have told them in that film, as you'll see as the film unravels, and the type of things that they end up doing to just keep fostering that lie. I mean, it's really insane. This is probably an extreme example, and I'm not saying, you know, that happens with people, even with the crazy shit that happens, say, in like Jesus camp or something. But it's a good thing to go out and reference if you really don't think that just telling kids whatever you want them, you know, to believe, just because you happen to believe it is a bad thing. That would kind of show you why that can be very bad, very bad. I mean, indoctrination, it's a form of mental rape. I mean, if they're not in an age where they can tell fantasy from reality, like I said, they can't make up their own mind yet. They shouldn't just be constantly bombarded with that type of stuff. I mean, it's already an admission that what you're trying to get them to believe isn't true, if the only way you think, they'll believe it as an adult is by constant reinforcement, having it pounded and drilled into their heads, you know, and all this religious shit, sending them to religious camps and having them do all these other things and just, I don't know, just totally get immersed in that and isolated from the quote-unquote sinful world, as these really crazy Christians like to think. That's totally abuse. I mean, get to the real main one, which is telling kids that hell exists, and if they don't do what they're supposed to, they're going to burn and be tortured forever. And you're telling this to children, or even if it's not them directly, but let's say they have friends who are Muslim or Jews or atheists or whatever, or from parents or atheists or whatever, and then the person's parents has told this child that all those other people that you're friends, they're going to hell, and they're going to suffer, and I mean, that's going to cost untold amounts of psychological trauma and stress on that child. It's pretty damn clear that telling a child they're going to go to hell at the age when they believe in the boogeyman, and all that stuff, that is absolutely child abuse. I mean, just think of the fact if an adult, purposely enforced and did things to encourage and recapitulate the fear of the boogeyman in that child on purpose, what would we think of this person? It'd be a monster. I mean, even if it was for kind of benign reasons, like they wanted the kid to go to bed on time, they wanted them to not eat cookies and spoil their dinner, or they wanted to stop running around and crying in the supermarket. It wouldn't be okay to say, oh, well, let's lie to you and say this horrible thing is going to happen to you if you don't do what you're supposed to do. Because even if that got them to do what you wanted them to do, all the baggage and what you're doing along with that is not worth the benefit you're getting as a parent from that. I mean, because they might do those things, but if the cost of that is also this overlay of ridiculous psychological trauma, it might take them years of therapy to get through, or might totally mess up their development as they develop into adolescence and adulthood. Well, then it's not worth the price. There's better ways to make your child behave. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm the leading parenting expert. I don't have children, and I don't claim to be an expert on that. I don't claim to be Dr. Phil either, anything stupid like that. So, but still, it's still abundantly clear that even not being a parent to someone who might not ever have kids, I still know that that causes psychological trauma to the child. It's not in their best interest, no matter what the parents happen to believe or what they prioritize. Whether they want them to believe and have the same values, and they believe in the same religion, and they want them to use that to mold them into the type of person they'd want them to be. Which goes back to what I was talking about earlier. You don't have the right to just tell your children. Mold your children into little versions of yourselves. They're independent beings. They're going to have their own choices to make in life, and if they don't converge with what you had planned for them, well, too bad. They're people. They're not dolls you can just play with. They're not action figures. You pose them how you want to pose them. I mean, you can't do that. If you think you can just tell kids whatever you want to because you believe it or you want them to believe it, I mean, then if you're okay with the religious ones, you're going to have to be consistent. You're going to have to be okay with what I'm proposing right here. So if you wouldn't think, or if you would think that if you told your child 3 + 3 is 28 and kept reinforcing it every time they did their math homework, or that from early age in childhood when you're reading them children's books all the way up into adolescence or the time they're 8 years old or whatever, or even 6 years old, you've been telling them that the color everyone else sees and refers to as blue is red and vice versa, or using the word chair and the word airplane interchangeably. I mean, sure, these things can be undone, but it's going to be very hard and disorienting for them once they get out there in the world and they find that things aren't that way. They're going to be like talking to their friends. They're going to be at school. They're going to be like, what is going on here? I mean, and it's completely unnecessary. There are enough challenges in life. There are enough emotional things and enough things that have to discover, which can be traumatizing on their own. I mean, just people going to be a teenager and going through high school, all those things. They don't need extra baggage on top of that, which doesn't even serve a purpose, which is what religious indoctrination would do. I mean, it is no different than telling them 3 + 3 is 28, because if you tell them you're an unworthy sinner and you're going to go to hell if you don't do X, Y, and Z, it's just as factually ridiculous as saying 3 + 3 is 28, but it has an added horror of not just being untrue, but being sinister and really wicked in a way, because you're going to destroy their self-esteem in a way that telling them 3 + 3 is 28 won't. In any case, I think any Christian parent out there is going to agree that you wouldn't just tell them things you know to be untrue. But it doesn't excuse things that, you know, people out of ignorance think are true, but there's no evidence for. That's basically the same thing as is teaching somebody, or, you know, or telling somebody something that you know isn't true. Because it doesn't get, ignorance is no excuse. It doesn't get someone off the hook to say, "Well, I really believe in this Jesus stuff, so I had good intentions and you wanted to do." Because if there's no evidence for it, there's no justification for imposing that. You have no way to distinguish it from just you flat out lying to the child and telling them things that you do know to not be true. The point should be clear now. I mean, I don't know what else I can say to really try to drive this point home that it's child abuse. Maybe I can just briefly mention. You know, something that would be an example of consciousness raising, which is what Richard Dawkins talked about. I mean, he's been somewhat of a champion of this idea that religious indoctrination is child abuse. And he uses the analogy of, you know, when someone says, "Oh, this is a Muslim child, a Catholic child, a Hindu child, or whatever," we wouldn't say this was a Keynesian child or a communist child, a socialist child, you know, even though their parents have those political or economic or cultural views or whatever, you know, because a child, it doesn't have the right mind to understand those concepts, to be able to know what they believe in regards to those things yet. So why would you label them with that? And when you have that strong of an indoctrination implanted, and you have it wrapped up with someone's self-identity, and you tell them you can't be moral without God or religion, or you tell them that, oh, this is part of who you are, it's part of your national heritage, it's part of pride of who you are, to believe all these things, and you put it all in there, and then you just send them on their way. They're in a whole world of hurt when they get out in the world and they find out that stuff's not true, and it all unravels. Then they make illogical conclusions, fall prey to fallacies, and you know, and then psychologically, you know, it'll take years for them to get through that. I mean, it's just thankfully that everybody's indoctrination in religion isn't as bad as, say, you know, the people in that Jesus camp video or any other fundamentalists, or, you know, in Wahhabi Islam in these faith schools or whatever. But I mean, even the more, you know, kind of mundane ones, the less harmful ones, I mean, they're still not doing a service to children. I mean, by exposing them to it at an early age. You know, to their credit though, what the Amish do is they take their young people at a certain age, and when they reach adulthood and the rite of passage, they can go out into the world, see the technology, see what it's like to live out there, and if they choose to stay there, they're allowed to. I mean, they're not called a heretic or or kicked out of their family and disowned or anything, but if they have the choice of coming back, but if they do, then it's just an acknowledgement that they're willing to do all their hard tasks without technology, and they're willing to live with the burden of those rules if they come back. That's just part of the accepted practice. But they have the ability to go out and not have that imposed on them, and they don't just, you know, force them from an early age to say, "Oh, here, you're going to do this. There's no chance of you ever. We don't want you to ever think about going in the world or thinking about technology is good." And they don't tell them, "Well, this is the devil, you shouldn't use that," all these crazy things. So it shows you that just because there are religions and people want to instill religious values, it doesn't mean that you have to go the route of indoctrination. You can, the responsible thing to do would be wait until they're 17 or 18. Maybe you can have a discussion with them. You know, you can say, "Okay, here, now you want to, you know, here's stuff, here's material, here's the Bible, here's this," but not before that. You know, if they express an interest in it. You know, if they don't, I mean, then they should have the option of not having to go through that stuff. Just because a person has one particular religious view doesn't mean that their kids have to have it. This is why, I guess, you know, people, atheist or agnostic parents, have been better about this. Maybe they're almost too timid. You know, it's come up on both the Atheist Experience and in other things online, blogs and such, that they don't want to be like the religionists that they go far out of their way to make sure that they don't want to be imposing, you know, and just saying, "Oh, we're forcing your kids to be skeptical," and all these other things, even though you should be teaching them critical thinking and all these other things, and reason, use logic and reason, and to appreciate science. I mean, you shouldn't be telling them, "Oh, hey, everyone else who's in a religion, they're all stupid and you're better than them," or something. But I think I'm at a loss now. I think I've covered everything I can in this, and sorry for the fact that this is going to have to be edited a lot. So I'll see you in the next one. I think I've made all the points in this one.